Welcome to Scoreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey, and this time we are talking about South Korean Championships 2024, or you could call it Korean Nationals, either way, but that's the official title for it. So a couple of things. One, this is probably going to be a pretty short episode because this is a fairly small event from the standpoint of the fact that there is only one ice dance team in the competition and no pairs competition at all. So fairly small. So we're going to keep this fairly short. We had thought about combining it with our coverage for basically a preview for Europeans and also for Canadian nationals. But I felt like it made more sense to just have one that's dedicated to the Korean contingent and looking at this event. And also, just before we get started, I want to just say that we are aware of the current news cycle around the allegations around Canadian ice dancer Nicholas Sorensen.
Yeah.
And that is a awful story. Certainly something we will talk about a little bit when we get to the episode leading up to the Canadian Nationals. But we really don't want to reflect on that or speculate on that in any way in this particular episode. So we're going to keep this focused on the Korean event.
Yeah.
And
we don't want to sully this conversation that is about totally different athletes in a different country with that news, but we will be talking about it.
Right. So we just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. Focusing here on the Korean event, we've talked a lot about this season how the Korean Federation has just a bevy of really talented single skaters that have underperformed a lot this season.
And there's been a lot of injuries as well. So it's not been a great season for South Korea, even after a fantastic season last year.
Yeah, when we got into the end of last season, you saw some big come-ups from Junhwan Cha and Haein Lee. They had performed so well at Four Continents, at Worlds, at World Team Trophy. And so we were really looking forward to a lot of momentum going into this season that seemed to evaporate during the Challenger Series when we saw a reflection of a lot of those injuries and training changes. A lot of the skaters who looked underconditioned going into those early events and then mostly underperformed, with the exception of Chaeyeon Kim at the Grand Prix circuit.
Right.
What we saw happily at this event was a lot of return to form for a lot of the skaters here.
And a lot of smart choices. I will preface a lot of this competition with the awareness that in Korea, they are very strict in terms of their placements. What that means is whoever lands on the podium, if they are eligible, is often the person that will go to World Championships. And that's what this is deciding. So I think there were a lot of, I wouldn't say cautious programs, more thoughtful programs that were like, what do I need to make sure that I am on that team?
For some of the high-ranking senior competitors, you could see that there was a lot of strategy involved as far as not throwing more technical than you needed to win, to not risk further injury, to not risk melting down because you're trying to throw 5 quads in a program and your body can't take it, things like that. So there was definitely some cautious skates. But at the same time, it allowed some of these performers to really deliver better programs than we've seen earlier in the season.
And I think we should just hit the nail on the head and start with the biggest star out of Korea with Junhwan Cha.
Junhwan Cha, at this point, because he won this competition for the men, is the eight-time
South Korean national champion.
Right. So Junhwan's been holding it down for South Korea for quite a while. He's always been one of those competitors that you were expecting to break out big on the international scene, but it always seemed to fall a little shy of that until end of last season when he got onto the world podium. And
very deservedly so. He was remarkable at the 2023 Worlds.
Yes, he's a gorgeous skater, incredible artistic skills, incredible skating skills, and we really thought he was going to come in like a steamroller into this season. And instead, he was plagued by mistakes and injuries and conditioning problems. When we saw him in the early Challenger Series, he was just falling apart all over the place.
Yeah, like he did have a few second place positions here and there, but it was more due to weak fields than due to his own performances. But as the season went on, to be honest, the performances even got worse. And I think that was because he was skating with injury and just kept going. And finally, towards the second half of the Grand Prix series, he backed off of that. And the only competition he's done since then was the South Korean Ranking Championship, which got him onto the Four Continents team. And there he had skated kind of a watered down version of his programs to ensure that he didn't injure himself further, and was very successful there. Here, he also watered down those programs, but skated much better in just his overall style came back. The Jun-hwan Cha that we saw last year, maybe all of his quads weren't here, although his gorgeous quad sal was in both his short and his long. But what we saw was the actual skater that we've been waiting to see all season really come through. So it was really exciting and heartening to see the real Junhwan Cha walk in the room.
Yeah. Will the real Junhwan Cha please stand up?
And he did. He stood up the whole time.
He did. He stood up the whole thing. Some of the stuff that we saw from him early in the season that was really concerning, you mentioned he has one of the best quad salchows in the business.
Haein Lee Kageyama to me are like the best ones.
Right. And he was struggling with that in places. We saw him take some really bad falls on it in the Grand Prix on his one appearance. But what we also saw in the Challenger Series was that he couldn't land an axel.
Yeah, his triple axel was really looking bad. And here it looked gorgeous.
Although notably, he only did one.
One in his long program, yeah.
Yeah. There is that sense again of being a little conservative in the choices, watering down or just dialing back the difficulty level a little bit so that he could have clean skates and he could focus on the component part of it, which really shined here. I think
his Ina Bauer in that free program, it gave me all the feelings. It was so good.
One of the big redemptive elements here, he's had this Batman free skate this whole season, which has great music and a great general thematic premise, but it has not worked anytime during the season. I kept looking at it being like, this is a big dramatic piece and Junhwan should be able to skate up to it, and it wasn't working anytime before. This is the first point where I think that skate really worked and we saw the promise be delivered on for what that program could be. You made a mention while we were watching it that Junhwan's attention to just small details, the way he moves his hands, the little bits of extra positioning that are all over his programs, the mark of a real evolved artistic talent on the ice, that was showcased here in a big way.
I totally agree. I was thrilled to see the drama coming through from him because he's so good at the drama. And I am just excited to see where he takes it and hoping with 4 continents coming up in about a month that he can maintain that momentum and keep adding back in the technical side of it slowly. He's got 2+ months to Worlds. He's got time. Take it easy. Don't risk further injury. He's looking great.
Like we've been talking about, that this is technically a streamlined program versus what he will have to do on the international level to truly compete. He won this contest with a 275.94 total,
which is respectable.
It's a very respectable number.
It's not going to compete against the best in the world right now, but it doesn't have to here.
Right. And this is sort of the opposite of what we've seen at other national events where people have had to really go out and throw all the firepower they have, like just like we saw with
All Japan.
Yeah, with All Japan, they had to put everything on the line. Here, he could go with a softer version of his program, score enough to, still win by 34 points because the field for the men was not super strong here. What it does do, I hope, is create a lot of confidence and momentum for Junhwan Cha to carry into 4 continents and beyond and show that hopefully that he's mostly completely healed from this injury and is in the condition now to really fight like the champion we know he can be.
I will say, though, the second place person we have seen quite a bit of over the years, Sihyeong Lee, he's always been what seems to be a very nice guy. Like there's something very amiable and nice. You always see him kind of being the friend to everybody on the Korean team. And he also has a very distinct jumping style because he puts both of his arms over his head for most of his jumps. Maybe not all, but most. I can't remember seeing anybody else ever do a triple axel with both arms over their head, and he does. I'm sure I'm wrong, but it's very distinct. I'll leave it there.
I really feel like there's 1 or 2 of the Russian women who do it, but of
You're
the
probably
men,
right.
I don't remember any man doing that.
Here, he brought something that I've never seen before, which was charisma. He's always seemed very amiable on the ice, but never really a very artistic skater in any way, and also very inconsistent. Here, he was very consistent in both programs. And while not the artist of a Junhwan by any stretch, still great improvement from him and just nice to see 2 really strong skates from somebody who I know isn't known to be a clean skater, if you will.
Sihyeong Lee, if you watched World Team Trophy last year, which was just one of my favorite things about that entire season. It was fun. So fun. One of the things about that very idiosyncratic event, as far as how playful everything is and how the teams are encouraged to do really goofy things in their boxes, was that every time that Sihyeong Lee would take the ice, his team would wear these little get-ups that would put like a stuffed arm over their head, like it was doing. I think
it was like little cardboard cutouts, almost like.
That's what it was. Yeah, it was cardboard cutouts. Yes, that they all wore to show, because it is such a signature part of him. And they talked about it at that event, that it was one of those things that when he was learning to jump, he learned to do that in the search for greater GOE, and then basically lost the ability to jump without it. So he does not know how to do jumps without his hands over his head.
Yeah, certain jumps. It's so interesting. I'm fascinated by how skating works for each person. To use the word idiosyncratic, it really is. What are the things that work for you? And this works for him. It makes him stand out for sure.
Another thing about Sihyeong Lee is that he is, relatively speaking, tall and lanky. Yes. He's a little similar to like a Sota Yamamoto as far as being kind of this tall beanpole, but completely different physicality and completely different approach on the ice. So I thought his stuff here was really entertaining. His short program to Feeling Good, which apologies to Jackie Wong from Rocker Skating, who despises that song.
That's fair.
For good reason, because it gets used constantly in figure skating. But I thought that Sihyeong's program to that was really fun. And overall, I was just really pleased with his skating at this event.
In the bronze position, Minkyu Seo, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I'm trying. He's 15. He's a junior level skater, but this is his second national bronze medal in Korea. He had it last year as well. He was in sixth going in from the short program, had a really strong free skate, and came through for another bronze medal, which was really impressive. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but I mean, I'm very unfamiliar with his skating overall. And the thing that I noticed was because Junhwan and Sihyeong are both tall and lanky fellows, he came out and he's so small.
He's so small.
I felt terrible. I'm like, this should not be the only thing I notice about you, is that you're so small, because the others were so tall. I'm sorry.
I want to put an asterisk here, because I think this is something that we probably need to address as well. But much like we saw at All Japan and a lot of these national competitions, you will see a blending between the senior competitors and then the junior level competitors who can compete at these events on a domestic level, but cannot, according to ISU rules, compete on the international level at the senior level. Yep. So much like Japan, where we, particularly in the women, saw a really competitive field between the seniors and the juniors.
And that was the case here too.
Yes, in a big way. So what you see is a healthy new crop of junior competitors coming up that right now can put, at least domestically, a lot of pressure on their countrymen in these competitions.
Admittedly, this competition also wasn't the easiest to watch, although a bit easier than All Japan, because one channel from Korea did share kind of the top level competitors, which was very helpful.
Yeah, KB Sports or KBS shared a lot of this stuff, and I'll try to remember to put links to it in here so that if you didn't get a chance to actually watch this, a lot of those are very accessible, no VPN needed or whatever. And it's really worth watching some of these really nice skates. So I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes.
All right. Well, then I think we can move on to the women's competition, which was a deeper field for sure. And definitely to your point about the junior level competition, it was such an even mix here in the top 6 or 7 skaters.
There's a couple of stories here. One is that one of my personal favorite skaters, Yeseong Kim, pulled out of this competition.
I'm not sure quite why. I haven't found anything, at least not on skating news sites that I tend to visit, that have said exactly what the reasoning behind it was, but it was definitely disappointing not to see her here. Yeah,
Yeseong is just a gorgeous skater, just an incredible artist on ice. And I gush over her skating every time we see her, even though she has underperformed this season.
And also been dealing with injury.
Right. It's just been a very disappointing season for her overall, and even worse so to see her pull out of her national competition. So my fervent hope is that she's okay and that they're taking care of injury or working on whatever it is for otherwise. But because of the way the Korean system works with this stuff, I don't know that we're going to see her anymore this season. So that might be the end of her elite competition this year. That's a bummer for me, but there were a couple of other faves in here. Haein Lee was in this competition, and Young Yu, along with the winner of this competition, the junior skater, Jia Shin.
The junior phenom skater, Jia Shin. The rivalry between Korea's Jia Shin and Japan's Mao Shimada has the promise of being something that we're going to be watching for a long time because they're both so strong, but so different. And Jia came in here as the reigning senior national champion at 15 to take her second title very handily.
So this is another one of those time periods where when we look at the last year or two, we would be looking for a Haein Lee to be walking away with something like this. She lands on the podium here and takes second. We'll talk more about her in a second. But we've been watching her land in fourth at like every event she's been at.
At the Grand Prix, for sure.
Yeah, on the elite level this season, which has been really weird. And a lot of the talk early on was that she was really working towards peaking late, the same with Yeseong. So there wasn't that much concern. They're like, okay, this is fine for now. We're going to peak later in the season and do better. And certainly Haein performs very nicely here. But still, this is where I would absolutely have thought this should have been her program to take. But then Jia Shin, like we saw her in the Grand Prix final for the juniors. And like you said, it was a showdown between her and Mao Shimada, which Mao Shimada basically eked out because of her ability to throw a triple axel and a quad toe in her free skate. But Jia Shin, for a junior skater, has such evolved artistry, such grace on the ice, and such terrific skating skills. And there's technical holes in her arsenal as far as like things that she's going to need to compete on the senior level in some places.
But it's minimal. Her score overall here was a 218.
Yeah, it's a 218.36.
And I mean, when you think about Kaori Sakamoto's Grand Prix senior win, it was 226. So that's not too far apart. And it really shows how strong of an overall competitor Jia Shin is already. And yes, she has 2 more years before she can move on into the senior ranks. But if she can maintain is really the question, because right now she looks spectacular.
When you're looking at junior skaters, the question across all of them, but I think particularly with the women, is what does it look like as they grow and evolve from junior to senior level? Because, you know, there's
as they physically grow.
Yeah, you physically change. That changes the way you move. You know, we've seen it plenty. Like the example I use a lot is like an Alyssa Liu, who was unstoppable. And then when she got a little older and her body shifted a little bit, she had to completely change the way she skated because it changed the way that she moved and jumped.
Well, it's Kimmy Rapond this year. Like she grew 7 or 8 centimeters. I mean, that changes things a lot. So her overall skating has had to change because of that.
Yeah. So you never know if somebody who can throw a triple axel when they're 14 can still do that at 17 or 18 or beyond. And those things are always a wild card for the future. But for the moment, Gia is terrific. I also just want to make a quick note that this is a event where no woman scored higher than her score of 69.08 in the short program. So you didn't have anybody break 70.
The 70, yeah.
And I feel like a lot of this season, and of course people would make the point that like without the Russians in it, we see things a little different as well. But like we just haven't seen a lot of numbers in the 70s for short programs for the women this season.
Not nearly as many as we have in the past.
But still, Jia Shin looked terrific here. Haein Lee looked better than I think that we've seen her all season.
Absolutely.
For one thing, she got a new short program.
Yeah, which was an interesting song choice. It's if you've ever seen the 80s half animated, half live action Who Framed Roger Rabbit, she skates to the song that Jessica Rabbit sings in that movie. And she does a beautiful job with it. And to be fair, the second half is a different song. But whatever that started, I was like, that's interesting. But it looks great on her. She looked much more strong and confident in that program. I really loved her short program, actually. Like the Sirens program that she had earlier in the season looked beautiful on her, but it wasn't working. So for her sake, obviously, if she changed it, it was for the best. And she looked great in this new short program.
We've seen a number of competitors make program changes at this point in the season. And that's something I appreciate. I feel like sometimes you see a competitor hold on to a crappy program well into the end of the season that they're struggling against. And many times I've referenced Maddie Skeezus last season with that god-awful West Side Story program that she just needed to shed so that she could shine on ice again. If it's not working, sometimes you can't fix it. You've got to get rid of it and then go to something that does work. That's what Haein did here. You saw a much more solid short program. She got a 68.43 out of it. Again, there's some technical that could be uplifted and improved, but it was still strong. I think she had
one edge call or a quarter turn. I'm not sure which. I have to go back and look. But overall, a minor error. And then her long program is the same long program she's been using throughout the season. I think it's starting to work. She finally is starting to own it a little bit more. I've always thought it was well choreographed, but she didn't look quite in it. And this time she really did. And she also, her technical looked more solid and more sound.
It's also worth noting, if you watch this performance, to see how emotional she is at the end of that free skate, because Haein is oftentimes one of the more unflappable skaters out of the Korean contingent. She always seems very amiable, very put together,
very even keeled.
Yeah, all vibes,
Yes, all vibes.
And even going through this season where she's kind of been consistently dropping in fourth place, she still keeps a pretty cool vibe, like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's about right. Okay. Very accepting. So her having a big emotional moment at the end of this feels like a breakthrough moment, because it feels like she felt the change, like the tipping point of, I overcame whatever obstacle was there for me and I'm skating more like I should.
Her going straight into 4 continents in a month and then worlds right after, I think is going to be great.
Yeah.
In the bronze medal position, Chaeyeon Kim, who I actually kind of expected to be more of a threat for the top of the podium, came in third. She had a rough short program. She had a fall. It seemed to just take the wind out of the rest of the program artistically as well. She got through it, and it wasn't a terrible score, but it definitely dropped her down. But her long program, I thought, was phenomenal.
After we watched it, I had the feeling that if she had not had the mistakes and the fall that she had in the short program, that she might have taken the whole competition. In comparing the scores afterwards, her free skate was still like 8 points back from Jia Shin's.
Yeah.
But I do think that Chaeyeon Kim's free skate was a more evolved and polished program overall, with no disrespect to Jia Shin because she was amazing. But Chaeyeon Kim's there, it just really hit for me. But yeah, that short program was a much more tentative and just not quite as strong as what we've seen from her early in the season. We saw her be so strong in the early Grand Prix, diminish a little bit right towards the end of it. So it's nice to see her here. So she was like in, I think, 9th place after the short program. Her free skate was the second highest rated. So she made it all the way back up to the podium to 3rd place. So it was a very, very nice, very respectable jump.
Absolutely.
And again, she is one of those people that is very young and still evolving, but is an absolute threat and is really strong.
Yeah, I only see bigger and better for her as we go along. I love the 4th and 5th place Korean women here because we were unfamiliar with them, being totally candid. It's Yeseong Kim and Yijae Kim. What was great is we did not know that they were twins going into this competition.
We saw Yeseong Kim's performance first, and
she's charming.
She's so charming, like huge smile, bright, big energy, kind of
Hana Yoshida-esque.
Yes, very Hana Yoshida-esque as far as the vibe that she puts out on the ice. She skated to Sia's cover of Fly Me to the Moon, which I really liked, and she was very enjoyable. But so we watched her short and free skate back to back in one video, and then we started this next video. And again, all the titles on these were in Korean, which we do not know how to read. So we kind of didn't know whose names were what. And so the next person came on and I got confused because I was like, well, we just watched her skate, but she's in a different what's going, is that the same girl? And you're like, no, this is a different person. Well, it's because they're twins.
But they were both great. I'm excited to see where they go. And again, big junior talent in South Korea. So much so that even the 6th place person, Minsol Kwon, is someone we've seen quite a lot of on the junior circuit. She was 6th at the Grand Prix final for juniors this season. She was 5th at Junior Worlds last year. By coming in 6th here in many other competitions at senior level, that would land her easily into position to go to Junior Worlds. But here it doesn't, because when you have Jia Shin and the twins ahead of her, and Korea is pretty stickler on where you land at nationals is who goes. She's not going to Junior Worlds. And she's a delightful skater. So it's both a bummer, but it's also showing how deep that junior women's field is in Korea right now.
The other big story out of this part of the competition is Youngyu.
I love Youngyu.
This is a skater that we talk about all the time because we adore Youngyu. She's had a difficult season. She was out with injury and other family stuff last year.
She was in and out. She competed at a few competitions here and there, but it was not a good season.
And in this season, it felt like we've seen her struggle with both consistency and with conditioning. There was a sense that she could kind of blow out about halfway through a free skate and that just programs were not coming together. She is a wonderful artistic talent. When she's on, she just commands an audience, but it has not been that kind of season for her. So one of my big takeaways from this particular event is her short program, because she, very similar to Haein, she jettisoned the short program she's been struggling with all season and went back to a previous one. And I think also did a new free skate at this one as well. So different programs for her here. And what you got in that short program was a glowing, energetic, well-executed program that got the biggest reaction, I think, of any skate at that event.
And it was just an absolute joy to watch. That's one we do need to link here because I want as many people to go and watch that particular performance from Youngyu, regardless of the fact that she lands in 7th here. It's worth the watch just for her hyping up the audience midway through and just glowing through her tango. It was perfect. It looked amazing on her. And just the look on her face at the end of it, the joy of completing something at that level again, you could see how much it meant to her. Her long program was not bad. It was really nice. It just did not have the technical levels that the people in front of her did. It didn't have any big mistakes, but it had enough small ones, and she left a lot of points on the table to bring her down from 3rd place from the short down into 7th overall.
Yeah, her free skate has a Lord of the Rings thematic.
Yeah, and her costume's so beautiful.
Yes, the whole look for it is fabulous. The musical choices are really nice in it. You know, knowing ahead of time when we watched it, we already knew that she was going to land in 7th. So we were watching this, expecting her to fall apart, you know, after she'd done so well in the short program, because she was in 2nd after the short. And we were thinking,
that's right.
Yeah. So we were thinking, oh, she must have some falls or it must fall apart in some way. And she doesn't. I mean, there's a few tiny errors, you know, she steps out of something, but she never falls. It's just the technical wasn't there. And we're pretty sure that she got some under rotation or edge calls.
And her speed wasn't there. I'll also say that.
And again, we talk about the conditioning part of things. You could see her struggle a little bit with running out of gas about halfway through that program and then kind of hyping herself back up and finishing strong. When you see her at the end of it, the way the crowd reacts to it, the way she emotionally reacts to it, she's happy with the skate. She doesn't love the scores and the kiss and cry, but you can also tell that she accepts it because she knows that she just was not throwing a technical program that was going to compete with especially some of the junior competitors that were in there. So you're looking at 127 points flat for that free skate. You know, that is not going to compete with Jia Shin's 149.28 or even down the list with any of those other skaters ahead of her who were all beating her by at least 4 points and beyond. So this is a case where Youngyu is a seasoned, wonderful competitor who still needs to rise back up to the level that we know that she's capable of. But this was really promising because these skates were beautiful and showcased the artist that we know she can be. And as far as we can tell, did get her name to the world team.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, with so many of the competitors that were ahead of her being in the junior level and not eligible to go to senior worlds this year, guess who's going? Youngyu.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap this up, we have one more team to talk about. And I did say one team, not just one discipline. It's ice dance. And there was one competitor, and they happen to be some of our favorite ice dancers right now, Hana Lim and Quan.
So very much like the All Japan Championships, where their pairs program only had one competitive team in it, here in ice dance is entirely Hana Lim and Quan. We've talked a lot about this season, end of last season, that, you know, we saw them for the first time last year as they were just coming up out of juniors, particularly when they showed up at World Team Trophy, because that's the only way that Korea could compete at that program. They had to have somebody, and they were their competitors there, and they did a brilliant job, and they won the crowd. And this whole season, Hana and Ye have been winning fans. We've been seeing it online, people talking about them. Their programs are really fun. They're a beautifully constructed team.
They are just a freaking delight.
Yes.
I love seeing them. No matter what they're doing, I am just happy when they're there.
What we saw from them here is, them competing against themselves, but doing it beautifully. Their free skate is just so lovely and dramatic and such a great showcase of who they are as skaters and what they're capable of, even though we know they're also great at humor and camp and silliness and some of their stuff too. This is a team that, while they have been in that 8th to 10th kind of range in a lot of the ice dance stuff against a lot of the other international elite competitors, we're seeing them creep up. Earlier in the season, they had a really good performance in Warsaw Cup.
Yeah, they came in second, only behind Lopreva and Brosseau from France. But their score there was a 187 total, which compared to quite a lot of the teams going right now would easily drop, and I shouldn't say easily, but it would drop them in the top 10 at Worlds. So I think from my perspective, that's probably their goal this year is, can they actually already in their first senior season actually break through to the top 10 in the world? If they can, that's a humongous deal. And frankly, even if they're in the top 12, it's a big deal.
Well, we've seen from them all season really great consistency, and in that consistency, consistent growth. We've seen just a little bit more refinement, a little bit more drama, a little bit crisper edges, a little bit more improved twizzles, things like that. They've been increasing the quality of their skates steadily along the way. And I think as an aspect of both great performances and wonderful personalities, have been winning fans along the way as well.
I want them to do really well at Worlds this season. And regardless of what they do, I mean, they're not, to be very candid, they're not anywhere near the podium for the major competitions right now, especially in ice dance. That just doesn't happen. But you want to talk about the people to keep the eyes on, them going into this next Olympics, and then really the one beyond that, if they continue on the path that they're on, just watch out for Hana and Ye. They're great. And plus, they're just the most fun to watch. They really, really are. So yay, Hana and Ye, for your first senior national title. Yeah.
So very exciting stuff there. That wraps up that competition because there, like I said, there was no pairs and there weren't any other people in the ice dance. So really, I mean, this was a very focused on the singles skaters, but there was a lot of really nice skates.
And I have to ask you the question of who was gold in your heart?
Oh, I mean, that's easy. It's Young Yu, particularly her short program here. It just punched me in the feels. I was just so happy to see it. There's a moment about 2/3 the way through it where she just kind of takes a pause and raises her hands and just kind of gestures to the audience to like clap or like just join in, right? She just says, get in this with me. And they do, and they respond to her. And it's so distinctly her and so closer to the vision of her skating and on ice persona that I've been looking for this whole season and not seeing. So I just love that. I loved her free skate as well. I think I need to go back and rewatch it now, not worried about what the points are or how it was going to be competitive there, and just enjoy it for what it was. But I just adore her skating. And yeah, I would hang that gold around her neck.
That's sweet. I'm going with our gold medalist of Junhwan Cha because I've been genuinely worried about him this season, just because he was so amazing last year. He's been consistently that guy in the background who's been knocking on the door of greatness for so long and finally came through last year and was like, oh, now he's stepping up into where he's supposed to be. And then this season so far, because of injury, because of changes in his coaching situation, whatever, he just hasn't been able to show up in the way that he's absolutely capable of. So seeing him come out and throw out 2 gorgeous programs and really not just land all the jumps, but show his greatness overall, his charisma on ice, his drama, that gorgeous Ina Bauer. It's all of the things I've been waiting all season to see. So he is not only gold on the podium, he's absolutely gold in my heart.
Well, with that said, and that's a great choice because, I mean, Junhwan is terrific.
Best cheekbones in the business.
I mean, he does. I mean, I'm sure there's a reason why they love putting him in ad campaigns and stuff. The guy is striking looking as well. But yeah, so with that, like I said at the top, we will talk about the upcoming Canadian Nationals and the European
next week. Europeans already?
Yeah,
that's nuts.
Big stuff coming soon. A lot of our favorite skaters will be showing up at those events, and so we're really excited about those. So we'll try to give you a little bit of a preview on those as well, which will probably be a fairly brief episode, but just to kind of get prepped for it.
Get excited.
Get hyped. But like usual, thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for engaging with us. We get such great, thoughtful comments over on the YouTube stream for this.
Y'all are going to make me cry one of these days. Some of those comments are so sweet.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That kind of thing really does help us out a ton. Just to know that you guys are appreciating this, that you're listening and engaging, and that you want thoughtful and enthusiastic and supportive kinds of conversations about this sport. So thank you for doing that. So if you're in the place where you can leave the comments and stuff, go in there and tell us who was gold in your heart this week. If you got to watch these, and if you haven't, like I said, we'll put links there. So do watch them so that you can come in and chat with us about it. But tell us what your favorite skates were, who you were excited to see here, who you think the future is for the Korean Skating Federation with all these upcoming juniors. You can always check out all of our episodes and links to all the places to subscribe and listening to the show at our website, scoreography.show. We are on Instagram as @Scoreography, and then at like Threads at @Scoreography, and Blue Sky at Scoreography.show. We're not really super active on those places right now. Instagram seems to be kind of the best one. So until we come back to you with that preview for Scoreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.